Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Fortunate Fishes. Our guest today is a longtime partner of R360, Charlie Engle. This guy has run the Sahara Desert, 4,300 miles in 111 days, through 6 countries, 2 marathons a day. The journey became the launch of H2O Africa. He raised over $6 million for clean water projects that eventually gave clean water to like 80 million people. Charlie's not just an endurance freak. He's a recovery story as well. He literally went from crack pipes to becoming one of the world's toughest ultra runners. And then he got taken down on a mortgage fraud case, did 16 months in federal prison. He came out, set another world of goals, including holding the Death Valley Cup record, Badwater 135 plus 508-mile Furnace Creek bike race in the same year. He's chasing his big dream, which he's going to do at age 64, Dead Sea to Everest, from the lowest to the highest point, crossing 5 countries, rowing 1,000 miles across pirate-infested waters of the Indian Ocean. This is really a story about grit, redemption, and the big life purpose to change the world. How the hell did you get an idea to cross the Sahara? What happens on the second mile of the Sahara? Cameras left, and now it's like, shit.
Yeah. It's a great question. And the Sahara really came out of, at that point in my life, I was about 13 years sober and still kind of finding my footing, no longer struggling with, am I going to drink and use drugs, but like, who the hell am I? What is going on? What is my trauma? How do I dig into this stuff? And I was a senior producer at this point. My life had gotten a lot better, and I was a producer on a TV show called Extreme Makeover Home Edition at the time.
That was a huge show, yeah.
Big show.
Yeah.
We were the #1 show on TV, and I started working on the pilot on that show. A friend of mine was the creator of the show, and I had been talking about this idea of running across the Sahara, but the quick step back, the Sahara idea came from a friend of mine in the Amazon jungle. I was doing a race and he just blurts out this idea. Hey, have you ever thought about running across the Sahara? I'm like, no, that's a stupid idea. It's a terrible idea. Why would I do that? And he's like, well, nobody's ever done it before. And look, firsts in the adventure world are really hard to come by. There's not many things that somebody else hasn't done. And at that point in my growth as a human, the idea of doing something and differentiating myself and in that way, part of it ego-based for sure, by that point had run races all over the world. I mean, I'd already been to 20 countries to do big events, and I knew that what I really loved was travel and cultural exploration.
How did it go from that's a stupid idea to like something that wasn't so stupid?
I think you can relate to this, and a lot of listeners can relate, because the real tell was that I couldn't stop thinking about it. Do you know what I mean? Because there's those ideas that you get, and no matter what your little voices are telling you, oh, forget this, it's terrible business, or that relationship will never work, or whatever. It's not how we're built. And I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And once I took possession of the idea, I started saying out loud to other people with no proof that I could do it, that I was going to be the first person to run across the Sahara Desert. A friend of mine who got sick and tired of hearing me talk about it, because I can talk a subject to death, he finally said, look, if you'll just, I'll introduce you to this director friend of mine if you'll just shut up and stop talking about it. And I said, yes. Well, turns out the director was James Mall, and he had won the Academy Award for Best Documentary the year before.
Holy cow. And before you go into that meeting,
yeah,
most listeners, they know where the Sahara Desert is. Oh, that's in Africa. What are things that listeners aren't like thinking about that you would have to explain to this guy of how you're actually going to do this and survive?
Yeah, well, you know how when people take a run on the beach, like the nice ocean, they go to the beach, where do they run? They run right next to the water because the sand is really firm. Guess what's not in the Sahara? Water. And so consequently, all of the sand that I ran across for 4,500 miles was basically the kind of sand you don't want to run on at the beach. It was 140-degree ground temperatures every single day for the first 45 days of this expedition.
There's like sandstorms and stuff like
every week.
And you got to protect yourself from the sun, no?
There were times when it was 120 degrees and I would be bundled head to toe, no exposed skin because the sand was blowing so hard onto our bodies that like you couldn't be exposed. It was like the exfoliation you never wanted. And so it was a very complicated thing.
I don't think the listeners are gonna really believe this, so I need you to
I
confirm
got
this as
proof.
truth. You have it on film. You were running 2 marathons a day in this fricking sand, which was sinking down, and 140-degree weather. Is that a true statement, or is that I'm making that up?
Absolutely true. 100% true and like so well documented and like you could do everything from go back and look at the dates and like the Sahara's the other than Death Valley, Sahara's the hottest place on the planet pretty much. And yeah, it was insane.
What's the most you've run in 24 hours without
Hmm.
stopping?
In 24 hours, 145 miles. So
And what's
pretty
a regular marathon?
26.2. So, you know,
So 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 you've
I've done some
that's
shit,
what?
Charlie.
That's like 5 marathons, 4.5, and you've run 4.5 consecutive marathons within a 24-hour period.
Yeah, a little over 5 actually. Yeah, you were right the first time. Yeah, so it's pretty intense. It's,
So that's how many people can actually do that in the world? Probably not a
not
lot,
many,
no?
not many, but when I say not many, you know, dozens. I mean, the crazy thing is, you know, there's, you know, in any sport, you got a certain number of people who are capable of doing it, and then you've got a certain number with the desire to actually take on something like that. Most people just wanna, like with a marathon, if it's a 100 miler or something, they just want to show up, get their number, do the race, pack up and leave. They don't want all the logistics.
You did start running as a young man, right?
I did. And you know, and it's funny, I thought I was going to be like my grandfather, who I told you this story a long time ago, but I'll just briefly, he was the head track coach at UNC Chapel Hill for 40 years, from like the 20s to the 60s. And then he died when I was young. But I grew up with that legacy in my family of people telling me in my family that I was a runner, just like my granddad, because he was an All American in track before he coached.
It was in your blood. So why weren't you, like, in the Olympics or something? I mean, that sounds like Superman or some superhero.
It took a long time for me to discover my zone of genius, which was long and slow. And actually, I've had a lot of genetic testing. You and I have talked about this stuff before. And I literally do have like an endurance gene. And the chemical makeup of me as a former addict, all those pieces of my personality and my genetics fit together to make me really good at suffering.
You've run over 5 marathons in a 24-hour period. Where did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, I did, but I even started before then with, you know, kind of family lore, which is the way families work. My grandfather had been the track coach at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill for 40 years, but he died when I was only a year old. So I never knew him, but I grew up with his legend and being told that I was just like my granddad. And you know how kids love to hear that kind of thing. And I took the identity of a runner, and I was a good high school runner. I played football and basketball. I was a good basketball player. I was a crappy football player, and I should have let all those other things go. But girls didn't like runners as much as they liked football players. And so I focused on the wrong things. And then I went to college and, you know, and I continued to run even as I found myself drinking and drugging more. Running was actually salvation for me. It was my place to go when things were really bad too.
I want to help listeners who have a crazy dream. Take us back to how you got to this director to show him this crazy idea. What happened that day? How did it happen? How do you go from that to roping in Matt Damon into this project? Any reader can go to Netflix, I think, or Prime and see it. But take us back to that actual day.
This is how things happen. So a friend who had been on TV for a while just kind of said, "Hey, if you'll stop talking about running the Sahara, you know, I'll introduce you to James Mall." I really didn't know who James Mall was, except that he was a big deal documentary filmmaker, and he had done The Last Days, which was about a group of Hungarian Jews at the end of World War II. Fascinating story, won the Academy Award, way over my head. I thought I was going to go meet James Mall so that maybe he could introduce me to a student director. I show up 20 minutes late to a 30-minute meeting. And I basically, cause I got lost on the Sony backlots in LA, and I slide into his office and I'm like, you know, never been done before. Native Tuaregs, biggest desert on the planet, heat, sand, like literally the worst pitch in history. And he stands up after those 10 minutes and puts out his hand and says, I'll do it. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah. He said, if you go do this thing, I'm going to be there with cameras. And I always tell young audiences when I'm speaking that passion overcomes preparation. The person that you're talking to, if they believe that your heart is in this thing 100%, even if your presentation sucks, which mine really did, you might actually get the job. And he called me a week later and said, I told you we need a production partner. I just hung up with Matt Damon and he wants to narrate the film and he'd like to be the executive producer. And he's like, is that okay with you? And you've known me for a while, so I actually deadpanned that I didn't say anything for like 5 seconds, which is a long time. And I'm like, James, I was really hoping for somebody better. But yeah, if Matt Damon wants to be on this, then have at it. And then ultimately Hans Zimmer signed on to do the score for the film. And I always like to say addicts are the best salespeople, man. I talked 3 Academy Award winners into the idea that running across the world's biggest sandbox was somehow a compelling movie idea.
When did it hit you when all this stuff came together and you're like, holy shit, I actually got to do this?
It was 6 months before.
Now I'm on the hook.
Right. It's a great question because 6 months before the expedition, man, I had been busy with logistics and like a million things because it's basically like starting a business. I mean, there's no difference when you got to write the plan, you got to execute, you got to do all these things. 6 months, 3:00 in the morning, I sit up in bed one night and I'm like, holy shit, I have to run across the Sahara Desert. Like I should probably start training, and at that point I got serious about my training. Ultimately, I know now that I would have trained completely differently today than I would have then. I made a lot of mistakes.
Take the audience to that day there in the first couple of days where you start figuring all this stuff out and how quickly maybe it could have kind of blown up.
It fell apart so fast. We started in Senegal, at the coast of Senegal, in a little spit of land, Saint Louis, Senegal, which is a fishing village right on the coast, and a little spit of the Sahara, because I wanted every step of this expedition to be within the Sahara Desert. So it's a tiny little spit of land that was still Sahara. We ran north, and by day 2, we're into Mauritania. So Senegal was only for a day and a half, really. Pretty much immediately, the heat started kicking our ass. And so by 7 days in, we'd lost support vehicles, support people had quit. We'd gotten lost in sandstorms. We'd run out of water twice. My teammates were on IVs, and it was a disaster. Actually, the executive producer, Matt Damon's old roommate from Harvard back in college, ran his production company. Larry was his name, and Larry calls me on a sat phone. He's like, look, I'm sorry to tell you, but you guys are way behind, and like, we're over budget already, and I can see the writing on the wall, and we're going to have to consider like pulling the plug on this thing. And I'm like going, sorry, you're breaking up. I can't hear you. And I took the battery out of the sat phone and I shoved that sat phone into my duffel bag, and I didn't look at it again for a week. And I do just want to say this because I know you'll appreciate it. I talk a lot these days, and you haven't even heard me talk about this because it's been such a revelation, especially for young people, but like for anyone on this planet, the attachment to a particular outcome of a big project, investment, or whatever is really detrimental to the success of the project and definitely detrimental to your happiness. I recognize that I'd been sober for like 15, 17 years, whatever it was by then, one day at a time. We all know the mantra. But I felt so much pressure to be successful in the Sahara. Millions of dollars invested, Matt Damon, my whole world was watching me. We're shooting a big film, and I was miserable because I had forgotten the lesson, the simple lesson that the only miles I could run were the ones right in front of me.
Did you figure that out after basically 1 week and putting the sat phone away? Is that when it clicked?
Yes. Yeah, because and I woke up on day 8, Charlie, and that was when I woke up on day 8 and I said, "The only thing I'm focused on is running a marathon this morning." I ran a marathon in the morning. I took a little break at lunch, had a little siesta, let a little bit of the worst part of the day pass by, got up, ran a second marathon in the afternoon, laid my little foam mat on the ground and looked at a billion stars because there wasn't an electric light within 500 miles of me, and laid there and gave thanks to the universe for the opportunity to be out here suffering. And that day changed everything for me and allowed me to then get up the next day and do it again and start really making progress.
I have this word leadering. Well, you got to leader yourself, and that's mental, but you weren't alone. You had a team. So tell me about your team and how did you lead, motivate them because their life is kind of in your hands.
Yeah. Well, and you saw the film, and a lot of people see the
Yeah.
film. And what I've learned through the years to say is that the reaction of any individual to the film Running the Sahara is more dependent on your background than on mine. And what I mean by that is like, you're a military guy, you're a retired veteran, police officers, firemen, teachers, CEOs, almost anybody in a position of authority is very understanding of me in the film. But I yell at people a lot in the film. What I like to say is, in any scenario, and especially in that one, there comes a time when you just have to say, shut the fuck up, put your shoes on, and let's go. Like, we can debate all the things that are going wrong and like whatever, but we've got 50 miles to run every day, and sitting here in camp isn't going to get the job done. And so sometimes my two co-runners, Kevin was very young and from Taiwan. He was 15 years younger than me. So he was in his
Okay.
late 20s at this
Okay.
time. And I'm in my mid 40s. And Ray, the Canadian, who was an age in between us, Ray, I could actually, I could yell at. And I mean, he might not like it, but like we had, there was enough push pull to make it work. With Kevin, if I yelled at him, man, he would cower and be like, it was not a management style that was going to work with him. And so, we're up at 4 o'clock. I'm a coffee snob. So I have my French press and I make my coffee. And by 5 o'clock, we're running. And I'm running. My shoes and my shit is on and we're going. And if they don't want to, if they want to sit there in camp, then they're going to
Catch
have
up.
to catch up with me. And that methodology, rather than trying to like berate them sometimes, and they both tried to quit. And this isn't, look, I'm not giving them a hard time for it. It was a quittable expedition because it was scary a lot of times. We're super exposed out in the middle of a desert, and we crossed Niger and Mali and Libya and into
And did you
Egypt.
have approval in all of these
We
countries?
had approvals except for Libya. This is 2006 and 7. There was a lot going on in that part of the world, and Libya wasn't giving us permission to go in. But once again, back to the power of an addict being persuasive, I had convinced everybody that we should just start this expedition, and surely Libya would give us permission at some point when they realized how serious we were. We never got that permission until we were 3 days away from Libya. There was a point right in the middle, you remember from the film, right in the middle of the film and in the middle of the desert, where our girlfriends all came out for Christmas. And we're in this little village, Agadez, Niger, and my two teammates basically announced that they're thinking of quitting. And it was one of many tantrums on my part when I said, fine, quit. I'm not quitting though. Like, I'm going to take that camel and those Snickers bars and I'm going to go to the border of Libya. And if the Libyans turn me away, I can live with that for the rest of my life. What I can't live with is stopping 300 miles short, assuming that we're not going to get in. So I basically guilted him into continuing, and we continued. And sure enough, we get permission. Lionel Richie got involved. I shit you not. It's such a funny story. Muammar Gaddafi's son was a big Hollywood and music person, and he found out that we wanted to come. And he is the one who ultimately And I'm not proud or not proud of this. It wasn't a political thing. I just wanted to run across this country. That's it. Libya turned out to be the gem of the entire expedition. It was the most gorgeous place.
And was there people there waiting for you at the border and all that stuff?
I'll tell you, when we got to the border, it was very anticlimactic. There were 2 oil barrels with flags sticking in them, and there was not a soul around. We didn't see our first person for like 3 days, and eventually we had to, like, check in and
Right.
all of that. My joke is that I think they thought we were coming in to, like, bring booze and mess with their women or whatever. We had a whole regiment of Libyan army with us at first. And finally they realized, "Oh my gosh, all these guys do is run all day every day." And by the time we reached Egypt, there's a great scene in the film where I'm literally arm in arm with my Libyan, guard, my security guy. I don't speak any Arabic. He never learned any English, but we had that just unspoken respect of just 2 human beings on this planet doing a thing, and there didn't have to be anything more than that.
Almost a third of a year you're doing this. How does a human body go through 2 marathons a day, day after day after day after day?
Yeah, it's a good question because for a while I didn't think that was going to be possible either. Trust me. I will say this though. I told you about that first week, and I call it diving into the abyss. For the first like 10 days, we really were down, 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 down. But the human body, everybody listen to this, no matter what excuse you make for not doing hard things physically, we're very resilient, and I like to term it this way. It's like on day 10, I woke up and my body said, okay, I get it. You're trying to kill me. So I need to start fighting back. And I mean, weirdly, I started to get better and better. I lost about 30 pounds. I lost them all though in the first half of the expedition. And then my body just sort of leveled out. And again, I really mean it. Like the body just said, okay, every single day we're only getting like 5 hours of sleep. You're running 50 miles. We're out here in this desert. We had 2 showers for 111 days. Like, you get into that mindset of discomfort.
And it reminds me, like, if you think of our ancestors prehistoric when there
Yeah,
was dinosaurs or whatever on the land, and you had to survive, your body did
yeah,
those things, and people ran 50 miles or
yeah.
whatever.
We like philosophical conversations, and I won't get into a deep one here, but comfort is overrated. Our ancestors did not sit around and think about the day they were going to retire and never work again. And like life on a daily basis was hard, and comfort, I'm not saying, and I'm certainly not saying that people shouldn't have a nice home or a car or whatever, but too much of our society, in my opinion, is wrapped up in getting more comfort. If
Yep.
you ask anybody, you and I know each other well. If I ask you, like, what's the most formative thing that's happened to you in your life? And I mean, you can pick different time frames. What happened? Like, what was that event that put you on this path to being who you are today?
A very recent one. I did something that people think is nuts and blah 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 blah, but this Father's Day, inspired because I had an opportunity to meet Gandhi's grandson, and he had 3 21-day fasts to do with the whole kind of system, how they discriminate the untouchables. And he wanted, like, what in me is causing this? And I'm not going to
Right.
complain. I'm just going to do this. And he was in prison like 9 months of that year. I did all this research, and I'm like, huh, if I do a 7-day fast, it reduces my chances of getting cancer by such a high percentage. And then I was going to do some stem cell treatment in Costa Rica. And I said, huh, if I'm on a fast and I do my treatment at 50 hours of my fast, I have my own bone marrow stem cells coming out of my body, and I'm in a regeneration mode, not digestion. So I went on a 7-day fast, and I have had no, and I mean no processed food of any kind since June 15th. No alcohol, no bread, pasta. If it was touched and processed with chemicals of any kind, it doesn't go into my body. It's like my own body had a revolution and a strike. And when your brain is on ketones, it is like so creative. I was hungry for the first 3 days, and day 2 and 3, I was a little fluey, but 4, 5, 6, 7, I had 0 hunger. My body's like, "Dude, 4 hours of sleep, I'm good. Let's get up and do something." I mean, I
Did
don't
you have a little fear going into it? I mean, just a little at least?
no. The only fear I had was I never told my wife. Like, what's she gonna do when she
Oh,
finds out?
yeah,
That was
yeah.
the only but by the time she found out, it was day 6, so
You just described, though, is so just to draw a big red circle around it, you chose voluntary, call it suffering, but challenge, whatever. You chose
yeah.
a voluntary situation to put yourself through hardship because experience has told you not only will you bounce back stronger, but the lessons that you'll learn. Okay, your body, that's all well and good, but your mind is the thing that got you through that. And like that is the power.
Absolutely.
That's what resilience is.
I'm making my own food now, like, and I'm eating things that I never ate before.
I feel like there's a Charlie Garcia fasting cookbook coming. So
Yeah, no, because my wife said, "If you write that cookbook, they'll shoot you," which is
this started by you asking me, like, how does the human body recover from that? And the
yeah.
fact is, people ask me all the time to come in and do talks. I speak all over the world, and resilience is always the topic. And I, not always, but a lot of times, first thing that I say is, okay, just so everybody understands, I can't teach you anything about resilience. The only way you learn resilience is to do stuff yourself and to do hard things on purpose. Then you learn. You can't teach a child resilience. You got to allow them to fail and go through some hard times. And that's where resilience comes from, is recognizing that it's not going to kill you and you just got to keep moving forward.
You've obviously framed your thinking around because you had said it a few times that you can suffer longer than anybody else. What is that suffering part, and how do you think about that superpower?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you, man. Some of this has happened since I've known you, but I recognize and freely admit that some of my suffering, especially in those early years, was a combination of self punishment because I felt lousy about myself. I didn't like myself. I certainly didn't love myself. I didn't feel loved or lovable in the world. And consequently, I just kicked my own ass because I thought what I needed to do was like beat the addict personality out of me. And it took all those years, early years of running my ass off and chasing around and doing stuff and being crazy to recognize that that addictive part of my personality, the obsessive part of me is all the best parts of me. That's what makes me good at stuff. You know, it's
Right.
what it's what makes me a good friend to people. It's what makes me a good like I'm diligent, man. You're going to have to kill me to stop me. And that's not a cocky macho statement. That's not what I mean. I just mean that the core of who I am that I discovered, it's much more about loyalty and love of my friends and of my family.
And that's what I love about brings to mind the R360 logo is black and white. And we're human, we're not God, but the white part is the heart, being in the light. But we all have darkness, our ego, our selfishness, our we don't love others or ourselves, we want to punish. And look, the constant struggle for all of us is to be in the light. And if you have a 80% day in the light, that's a good day.
Yeah.
But you have to love something bigger than yourself. You have to love yourself. You have to love others. But the loving yourself is not easy sometimes.
We as humans tend to make the mistake that, let's say you're on a whatever diet and you're trying to lose some weight or whatever, and we've all heard this story before, but like you're doing great for a week and then I don't know, you have an argument with somebody or something happens at work and you come home and you eat half a chocolate cake. Like everything in you says, oh my god, I just threw everything away and like I suck. And like that self-talk that we give to ourselves about how crappy we are as a person and what's wrong with me and all of that talk. The hardest thing to do, and this is what I say over and over, Charlie, is in life, we don't get through hard times. We really just have to get through hard moments. Most of the time, if we can learn to let those hard 5 minutes or 30 minutes pass by gracefully, not escalate the argument that you're having with somebody, not escalate the fact that you screwed something up or make a big mistake or the person in your life made a mistake and like rolling it into this anger and this like what have you done to me, because that's usually that's how I'm talking about myself. That's how I
Right.
always did it, and I still do it once in a while. But the thing is, I don't have to live in that space anymore. I can say I'm sorry. I can say I'm sorry to myself and say like, "Hey, let's take a step back, do a little breath. Now I have the tools. Let's go do some breath work. Let's go sit in a cold plunge. Let me go for a little walk. I don't have to go run a marathon, but let me put a little nice music on and walk outside and move my body for a minute, and all of that stuff just flushes away. And it took me forever to learn that lesson.
Wow. You've mentioned addict many times, and the listeners that don't know you have no idea what that's about. Talk us about your kind of lowest moment. Tell us what that whole thing was like.
My parents were 18 when I was born, so super young parents, and they divorced a year into my life. So my dad joined the army and actually left for about 6 years. So he wasn't in my life in those early years. And so I grew up in this very weird, hippie, eclectic 60s, and I had this weird world.
And
And
this is North Carolina?
it was in North Carolina. Yeah, mostly in Durham, North Carolina, in the area. My dad had moved to California, and I made a decision when I was 13, and it was actually a pretty crushing decision for my mother, but I decided to move in with my dad. I really wanted to play sport. My mom was a drama and theater person, and like I wasn't getting that part. And of
Right.
course, like most boys, especially, I really was desperate for that attention from my father. I move in with him and I go from playing no sports to six sports. Like I literally played every sport known to man in high school, and like I was all state in some things and top 10 in my class and student body president and dated some cheerleaders, and like I did the whole deal in high school and was pretty well liked. And I go to college at UNC Chapel Hill, and I think there's going to be a banner on my dorm like welcome Charlie, we're so glad you're here, like now we can all start having fun. And what I discovered was I was like very average. And a lot of people discover that when they go to college. I mean, I
Yeah.
was no there's 4,000 other freshmen that were there that had basically the same resume I had. What I figured out early, the drinking age was 18. I turned 18 like 2 weeks into my freshman year, and I'm pretty sure I was named to a couple of first team All-American drinking teams. And like I
And what was your
became that.
drink of choice? Were you a beer
Man,
guy?
I was a tequila and beer guy. Tequila and beer all
Right.
night, every night. And look, in the South, there's also, terrible things like Southern Comfort and just some
Right.
awful, sweet bourbons and stuff.
We had like Bacardi 151. I remember that one in college.
100%. Oh my God. 151. Dude, I bartended in college illegally, because you need to be 21. But I remember being behind the bar and literally blowing flames for 20 feet with Bacardi 151 behind the bar. So thank you for that very disturbing memory.
So it started with alcohol in college.
Yeah. But then I went to, this story too. I went to Carolina, and I actually I was recruited to play football at Carolina. I never played. I went out for the basketball team because I still was cocky. And this is UNC. This is Dean Smith. This is like all of that. I go out for the team and I make it. I make the JV basketball team at University of North Carolina, and I played for 2 years.
Some famous players there at that time,
There's a
no?
few famous players. A guy named
Yeah.
Michael Jordan actually went there, and lo and behold, he came in my sophomore year, and like I played on the same court with him, for a couple of years with, in practice. And like it was an amazing time at Carolina. We won a national championship in 82, and like it was fun, but you could only play JV for 2 years, and if you weren't good enough to get moved up to varsity, then you
Yeah.
couldn't have that spot anymore. And basically, I was hanging on by a thread, Charlie. I was drinking. I've been introduced to cocaine, which the 80s, or as I like to call them, the cocaine decade, it was really a big thing. Miami Vice, and
Yeah.
like, it was just an insane time to be in college. I mean, now is to all times are. But other people, my fraternity brothers and friends, like, and I'm not advocating this, but like, there could be some cocaine around. They'd do a couple of lines, they'd drink, they'd go to bed at 2 o'clock and actually get up and go to class the next day. That was not me. And so, pretty early in that experience, I learned that once I started, I was never going to stop at any particular time until there was no more money, no more drugs, no more booze. That was the only thing that would stop me. And my second semester junior year, I didn't go to a single class. And the university had the audacity to ask me to leave?
Oh
Like,
my God, of course.
how
Hey,
dare they?
where is this guy?
But,
Wow.
and
You're like,
then I started a 10-year, run from the time, until I was 29 years old. I moved all over the country, lived.
now you had a gift for sales, and actually you were a very accomplished
Yeah.
salesperson at real companies, but you did get
Uh-huh.
married, had some boys. What
Yeah.
walk us through that?
Yeah, I mean, look, man, it turned out, again, this is when I started saying that addicts are the best salespeople, because partly because sincerely, we tell people all the time that I promise I'll never do that again, when we've screwed up for the millionth time. And when I was living in Atlanta, and this is a very formative thing, and so a lot of the listeners will, I think, appreciate this. I was a top salesman at a company called Bally's, which was a fitness company. And my personal sales trainer in person was Zig Ziglar.
Oh
And
my,
so
what?
and
It's like he's so
so
famous.
like, he
You
was
tell me
just
if you
he
ran
was
into this guy.
oh my god, yeah. Oh my gosh, hell yeah, for sure.
Jeffrey Giffer. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
and, like, when I learned how I had the natural ability to talk and to be, I think I had enough charisma and all of that, and even back then. Today, I hope that if I have one trait that I actually really like about myself, it's authenticity. It doesn't always serve me well, but
you're an athlete too, so you knew how to
yep,
set goals. You had
totally.
self-discipline.
Totally. Zig Ziglar, he taught me always answer a question with a question, as simple as, is the gold membership renewable? Well, would you like it to be? I mean, I realize that's a simple example, but like, you don't ever say yes or no to something. You always give a choice close. Would you like option A or would you like option B? Not, are we going to do this today? You don't give the customer an opportunity to say yes or no. You give them a choice. The sale doesn't begin until you hear the word no. I had that on my mirror for years because I really believe that. Otherwise, you're just an order taker. Like,
Yeah.
if you think you're a salesperson, but all you're really doing is sitting there taking orders, you're not selling,
No.
and most of the time, what you're selling is yourself. You may have the best product in the world, but if that customer doesn't respect or like you, or at least feel some warmth from you, they're not going to buy from you.
Right. Yeah, and if you believe in the product and you think the product is actually gonna
Yeah.
provide amazing value to the client, then it's a win-win and you're gonna do amazingly well
So
if
I
all
was
those
selling
things line up.
Toyotas in California, and I love Toyotas, and still to this day, I think Toyota's like the best company ever. And I
Yeah,
won their national sales contest 2 years in a row, and I sold over 700 cars a year for 2 years.
that's crazy.
And so, like,
Wow, I didn't know
I
that.
could sell, but I was in the bathroom doing lines off the back of the sink, and so it wasn't exactly, what I was doing. And I felt like if I had this success over here, it excused any behavior over here. And I think a lot of people go through life like that. It's like, well, I'm a gazillionaire. Like, who cares if I drink 8 drinks every night? Like, look at how successful I am, and it took a long time for me to stop equating the two things. It took my downfall, which,
Right.
the story. My first son was born, and a couple months after he was born, for no reason, nothing happened, but I just went on a binge, a 6-day crack smoking, drinking binge that ended with the police handcuffing me and searching my car. And, there's bullet holes in my car that were, put there by my Toyota 4Runner. And, and I'm sitting there on the ground, Charlie, and I know you're a religious man, and I'm sitting there on the ground, and I didn't grow up in a religious household and never really had prayed. But in that moment, I recognized that I needed some help. I really needed some help. And the thought, nobody's coming to save you until you take that first step,
Yeah.
really hit me. And I prayed. I put a prayer into the universe, and it's the first time ever that I had prayed that wasn't a Santa Claus prayer. It wasn't a bargain making prayer. It wasn't like, if you get me out of this, then here's what I'll do for you. It was just simply, I want this burden taken away. Like, I can't do this anymore. And I put those words out into the universe, but I put action behind it. I went to an AA meeting that night, and I got up the next morning and I went for a 2-mile awful run. And I committed to do those two things every single day until I felt better. 3 years later, I had run every single day, and I went to a meeting every single day for 3 years, and my life was so much better.
And what was happening those years? Because you told us you were on this very famous television show. So you went from selling cars to television.
I started a company, Charlie, when I got sober. Just before I got sober, I had the only company in the country that chased hailstorms. I chased hailstorms all over the world, and I did it because I made deals with insurance companies and car dealers to repair their hail-damaged cars.
Huh.
And I'm not going to go into the long version of how that happened, but you were in the service, so you can remember Fort Ord, which was in Monterey, California,
Yeah.
out there in the Monterey Peninsula. It closed. I was selling cars. I was the top salesman in the country when the base closed, and
Okay.
80% of our clientele was military. So all of a sudden, I had a job, but we had no customers. And I had heard about this crazy technique of fixing dents,
Right. Right.
without
Right.
painting. And I
I
started
remember
a
that.
company, and I hired a few guys, and we traveled, all over the country and even to Australia and Europe and other places to repair, and it was very lucrative, but it was seasonal. And this is the thing. I knew early on when I got sober that adventure was going to be like a big part of my life, and I didn't want a 12-month out of the year job. So I'd work my ass off for 6 months and fix hail damaged cars and run around crazy, even with my young family. But my wife, I made enough money,
Right.
we could afford to have her stay home with the kids. And it was great. And then when I came home for 6 months, man, I was Mr. Dad.
And how did you shift from that into being a television producer, which seems like a whole different skill set?
It is. And so funny enough, Mark Burnett, who most people kind of know through like Survivor or The Apprentice or some of his TV shows, he used to put on a race called the Eco Challenge. And the Eco Challenge was these 10-day heinous adventure races all around the world. And it's where I always say, physically, it's where I truly learned how to suffer properly. The TV show 48 Hours found out about my story, and this is all the way back in 2000. TV show 48 Hours came out to do a whole show on me and my experience at the Eco Challenge. Here I am, this sober guy. It's in Borneo, the race is. So we're 10
Wow.
days across the Borneo jungle. This film crew comes out there to the Borneo jungle, and the low man on the totem pole was this guy named Tom Foreman. And Tom was the like lowest assistant producer on the team. This 24-year-old little Jewish
Right.
kid, and like skinny as 120 pounds. You have never seen anybody more out of their element in the jungle in Borneo. But I took him under my wing a bit, even though I'm doing this race. Like,
Right.
he became kind of my guy. Flash forward, and this is the lesson: always be nice to everybody, because you never know when you're going to be working for them. Flash forward, 9/11 happens. Tom Foreman, 2 years after 9/11, was the executive producer of the only film that had the first plane hitting the first building. And he won a Peabody Award, and he won every award that you could win in journalism in his late
Wow.
20s. And he went on, he basically could write his ticket in Hollywood.
You had kept your relationship with them?
Yeah, and he became the creator of Extreme Makeover Home Edition. And he calls me and he's like, "Charlie, you are completely unqualified for this job. But if you don't tell anyone," but what he saw in me in the jungle in Borneo, because I was carrying a camera and doing like a video diary, what he saw was someone who would fight through anything. And Extreme Makeover Home Edition was a very hard show to make. I'd stay up for 5 days in a row, sober during this show. And like, I won awards on the show also.
What was your role? Like, what was the role
Yeah.
that he shaped for you?
I mean, I was a senior producer, but that was my title. But what I really did was not an over the shoulder camera, but kind of a mini DV version. I was the guy, if you ever watched the show, Ty Pennington and all the designers on the show, I was the behind the scenes guy. There'd be the big formal shots, but I would
Right.
follow them around with everything they were doing and building and cursing and having personal moments. And I would go interview some of the families in the neighborhood. I found out I was really good at sitting down with a person, just like we're doing right now, and asking them questions and getting them to open up to me.
And you had a filmmaker behind you while you're asking the questions?
Exactly. And I would be producing in that way. And like, I just kicked ass on that. I mean, it was one of the happiest times I'd ever had. And
Wow.
simultaneously, Charlie, I got, kind of ranked in that same time frame, 03, 04. I was ranked by some rankings the top ultra distance runner in the world. And so I had gone from, addict to being covered in Men's Journal and GQ and all these magazines covering me. And this is before the Sahara even. And
Right,
like,
but when you went into the Sahara thing, you already you had chops because
I
you
did.
had these rankings, plus you were a senior producer, so
Yeah.
it wasn't like you were a nobody. He
No,
had to
I
at least
quit the
think,
show to run across the Sahara. I had to take a leave of absence because, I was going to go do this big project. And Tom Foreman today, that same guy, he actually is the most prolific producer in Hollywood still today. He's probably got 50 shows on TV these days, mostly on like cable.
before we get to what happened to you in 2010, tell us, like, how you finished, what happened when you finished, what your life became after doing this, like, incredible feat.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Sahara was the fulcrum of my life, no doubt. There was, if there's a teeter totter, it is the center point, and both good and bad. There's a lot of good that happened after. There's some really hard things that happen after, but the actual finishing, the completion of the expedition, and actually getting to the Red Sea and putting my feet after 4,500 miles into the Red Sea, I think the most poignant thing I could say to you, I had an interview with NPR like within an hour of finishing. And
Wow.
I'm sitting there, I have a baseball sized blister on the bottom of one of my feet, and I'm exhausted and I'm just cooked. We had been elated, feet in the water, hugging each other and crying and like all these things. And the first question I got asked by the woman on the NPR show is obvious question, softball. So how does it feel? Like, how does it feel to be done with this thing? And I paused for a second with no knowledge that I was getting ready to say this, but I said, this might be the saddest day of my life. And it just fell out of me because the recognition that not just the 2 years of like getting ready and then doing this thing and all of that, it's over. Again, we spend so much time in our lives trying to accomplish things, but most of us can relate to that idea, just like getting that, you know if wealth is your thing, just like getting that first check for $1 million. I've heard people tell these stories, like, and they get it and then it's like, ooh, that doesn't feel as good as I thought it was going to feel. Like, now I need to get more, and I understood in that moment that I didn't understand how to fill this part of me that still needed a lot of work, and that even running all the way, while I was proud of myself and I took satisfaction, I
And
still
you had
did.
shifted, Charlie, to day by day by day by this point too.
Yes, totally,
So there was no
100%.
next day. The day
No, there was, right? You know what?
it was over.
I woke up in a panic at 4 o'clock in the morning for like 10 days straight. like, oh my God, why am I not running? Why am I not running? And like, and it was wild. But look, it put me on the map. I raised $6 million while I was out there. Matt Damon had a lot to do with that too, but I wasn't doing it for philanthropy. I was doing it to see if I could do it. And I tell people all the time, like, it's great to do things for charity and all of that, but the number one charity you have is you. And if you make yourself better, then you can be of better service to the rest of the world. And so be sure that you're focusing sometimes on things that you want to do. And I kicked ass, man. I signed with William Morris. I got an agent. I got book deals. I got TV. I got all these things. My speaking contracts were through the roof. And like, I couldn't even keep up with all of them. It was great. But I still recognized at that point that I didn't know what I didn't know. I still wasn't filling that part of me that needed some extra work.
When you went back to the US and all these great things were happening to you, were you still running and going to the meetings, AA meetings at that time?
Yes, I still was. Although I will say around that time, I started getting a little disenchanted with some of the dogma around the program, the
Right.
12-step programs, not just one, but like all of them. And there's a rigidity and a judgment to things that's not supposed to be there that I started to get frustrated with. And I recognized that for me, I wouldn't have
Right.
been alive without AA. And I also, though, wouldn't have been alive without running. I saved my own life through running equally as much as the support that I got out of that program. But things started to really shift. I decided to do a run across the United States. I was trying to set a record for the fastest run across the US, and like, I got MRSA, the staph infection right before the start of this thing, and we made another film. It's actually an amazing film, but I totally, after 20 days of running 75 miles a day, 3 marathons, I fell apart physically. And we finished the film, but I ended up riding a bike the rest of the way, and it was a disappointing ending for me. I was speaking all over, and I was starting to find my groove with what is my message, like what did I want to tell people.